Hello, I'm Jacob Stein. I'm an asset protection attorney in Los Angeles, California. And this is a quick and to-the-point presentation on using limited liability companies to protect assets. So what's a limited liability company? A limited liability company, commonly called an LLC, is a legal entity. It's a type of a legal entity similar to corporations, general partnerships, limited partnerships, and other types of legal entities. So why is it that we use LLCs so frequently to protect assets? Why not corporations? Well, let's take a look at how different types of entities function to protect assets. Let's say that our client owns two apartment buildings. He owns apartment building number 1 through a corporation. He owns apartment building number 2 through a limited liability company. Let's say that a tenant in each building slips and falls and files a lawsuit. Lawsuit number 1 is filed against the corporation. Lawsuit number 2 is filed against the limited liability company. The question is, can these lawsuits reach our client's personal assets? Meaning, can these lawsuits penetrate these two entities, pierce their corporate veil? And the answer, the general rule is no. The corporate veil of a corporation cannot be pierced. The general rule is that the corporate veil of an LLC cannot be pierced. But there are exceptions to this general rule, right? Under some circumstances, the corporate veil of a corporation can be pierced. Under some circumstances, the corporate veil of a limited liability company can be pierced. Is there a distinction between these two types of entities as far as piercing of the corporate veil? And the answer is yes, there is. Turns out that it is more difficult to pierce the corporate veil of a limited liability company. Corporations are subject to all sort of corporate formality requirements, right? We have to have the annual meetings, we have to have minutes of those meetings, and all sorts of other requirements. And if we fail to comply with these requirements, that is a reason to pierce the corporate veil. LLCs are not subject to these corporate formality requirements. They're not required to have minutes or meetings or do anything else. And because we're not required to do these things, our failure to do them cannot be used as a means of piercing of the corporate veil. So the LLC will give us more protection. Now let's change the facts a little bit. Let's say instead of the tenants in the building slipping and falling, our client, the one who owns the corporation, the one who owns the limited liability company, is driving home one day and he runs over a pedestrian. And he's not the one being sued personally. And the question is, can that plaintiff reach apartment building number 1? Can they reach apartment building number 2? The plaintiff goes to our client and says, I have a judgment against you. I want apartment building number 1. And our client says, apartment building number 1? I do not own it. And the plaintiff says, that's true, you do not own it. But there is something else here you own. You own the shares of stock of the corporation. How about we take those from you? And they can. The plaintiff can take from this debtor the shares of stock of the corporation. They become then the shareholder of this corporation. Once they're the shareholder of the corporation, all the underlying assets are theirs to do with as they please. They effectively now own that apartment building. The plaintiff now goes to our client and says, we want apartment building number 2. And the client again says, I do not own it. It's owned by an LLC. And the plaintiff says, well, yesterday we took your shares of stock. Today we will take your membership interest in this limited liability company. Turns out they cannot do that. Turns out that they are not allowed by law to take from our client his interest in a limited liability company. An LLC interest is not subject to attachment by a creditor. There is no such a remedy in any state in the United States. So if we own assets through a corporation, corporate stock can be taken from us. If we own an asset directly, that asset can be taken from us. If we own an asset through a limited liability company, the creditor is not allowed to take the LLC interest from us. And it's a great way of protecting assets. Setting up an LLC is not expensive. It is not complicated. There are no tax consequences as a general rule. Right? It's a very simple and effective way of protecting ownership of assets. Take assets that you own, transfer them into a limited liability company, and that's a very good form of asset protection plan. I am Jacob Stein, and I hope you've enjoyed this video on how to protect assets using limited liability companies. Thank you.